Hey, seventh graders. So on Thursday, actually, on Thursday, we began talking about solving one-step equations. So if I had something like a plus 15 equals 12, a plus 15 equals 12, I'm finding what a is. Now we are beginning to solve for our variable. So we want to find out what a equals. And remember we said that for solving one-step equations by addition and subtraction, what you do to one side of the equal sign, you have to do to the other. Remember, that's that property that we talked about called the addition property of equality or the subtraction property of equality. What that states is what you add to one side of the equal sign to make the equal sign equal, you have to add to the other side of the equal sign. To make each side of your equal sign equal each other, what you add to one side, you add to the other. Or what you subtract to one side, you subtract to the other. So we're going to be doing the same thing, but with multiplication and division now, which involves its own set of things. So we're going to talk about this. But let's look at this. This is a good warm-up practice for us. How would we solve this? A plus 15 equals 12. We know we need to get the variable by itself to solve, right? So what we would do is we need to get the variable on its own side of the equal sign. To do that, it looks like we're adding 15. So we need to do the opposite, remember, to get the variable by itself. You do the opposite operation to the term that is next to the variable to get it alone. So we are going to subtract 15 because subtraction is the opposite of addition. And again, until I am blue in the face, I will say what you do to one side of the equal sign, you need to do to the other. So you subtract 15 from the other side of the equal sign. Now, seventh graders, we spent so long practicing our facts, and I stress practicing facts so much because it comes in handy. Here we are. We need to know, what is 12 minus 15? Think about it. 12 minus 15. Your bigger number's on the bottom, so you will be in the negative numbers. 12 minus 15. You start at 12 and you are going 15 to the left. Where do you end up? At negative 3 equals, bring down your variable, a. Now, you want to make sure that this is right. If you want to make sure that your answer is right, you can plug it back in. Remember? To check your answer, you can plug it back in to see if it makes sense, because we were trying to find the number that we can add to 15 to get us to 12. So if we added negative 3 to 15, negative 3 plus 15, does that equal 12? Negative 3 plus 15. Start at 15, we're adding a negative, so we go to the left 3 spaces, 12. Checked out. So we're right. But now we're going to be working with addition or multiplication and division, excuse me. So let's erase this addition. It should have been review. I hope so. And let's look at some multiplication and division. I'm going to put a Google document on with this assignment for the notes. You need to copy the notes and the examples in your notebook, because just like addition and subtraction, we have the multiplication property of equality and the division property of equality. And both of them basically state that if you multiply a number to one side of the equal sign, you need to multiply it to the other. If you divide a number by one side of the equal sign, you need to do it to another. They basically state that you need to do the same thing to both sides of the equal sign. It's an equal sign. It means that both sides should be the same. So that makes sense. What you do to one side, you have to do to the other. So I'll put those on a Google document, and you need to take those notes in your notebook. I'll be checking that you have the notes in your notebook for a grade when we come back from virtual learning. So you need to make sure that you're taking notes. So let's look at some problems. Let us just get right down to it, shall we? If we had something like, what's this problem in my book here? We have 30 equals negative 15n. 30 equals negative 15n. So what we want to do is we want to solve for n. Looks like we're multiplying. See how we're multiplying negative 15 by n? So we want to find what number do we multiply by negative 15 to get us 30. What number can we multiply? What two numbers can we multiply to get 30? So to solve for n, since we're multiplying, remember just like addition and subtraction, when we were adding, we did the opposite, which was subtraction. We need to do the opposite. Since we are multiplying, we need to do the opposite of multiplication. What's the opposite of multiplication? What undoes multiplication? Remember, we talked about this with factoring and distributing. Remember, we talked about how factoring and distributing were opposites of each other. And remember, for one we multiplied, what did we do for the other? We divided. So division is the opposite of multiplication. So to undo multiplication, we divide. So we are going to divide this by a negative 15 to cancel that out on one side. The division property of equality states that what we do to one side of the equal side, we have to do to the other. So we need to divide the other side of the equal sign by negative 15. Now just do your math. What's 30 divided by a negative 15? A positive divided by a negative. A positive divided by a negative is a negative. So write down negative so you don't forget. It's really important that you remember these rules for positives and negatives and multiplication and division. Otherwise, you're going to be getting a lot of signs wrong, and I don't want that. Remember, we want our fun day when we get all of our signs right on a test. So 30 divided by 15 is 2 equals n. Okay, let's think about this. If we have a problem that reads negative 15 times a negative 2, what's the answer to negative 15 times a negative 2? A negative times a negative is a positive. 15 times 2 is 30. 30, 30. Looks like we got it right. Let's try another one. Let's say we have 48 equals 6x. 48 equals 6x. And we want to solve for x. So what do? We're multiplying, so we would divide. Let's divide. 48 divided by 6. 48 divided by 6 is 8. 8 equals x. Okay, 6 times 8. 48. Does this 48 equal that 48? Yup, looks like we got x right. Okay, but what if we were given something like this? What if we were given something like x over 3 equals negative 6? Well, I told you we're solving for x. So how would we solve for x? What would we do? This 3 is being divided. 3 is being divided by x. See how they're over each other as a fraction or a ratio? That means dividing. So this reads x divided by 3 equals negative 6. So we want to know what number divided by 3 gets us negative 6. Think of it this way. What number divided by 3 equals negative 6? So how do we figure that out? How do we undo this division? It's the opposite of division. Multiplication. So we multiply by 3 on this side, on the x side of the equal sign, and the multiplication property of equality states that whatever we do to one side of the equal sign, we have to do to the other. So if we multiplied by 3 on the x side of the equal sign, on the other side of the equal sign, we also have to multiply by 3. So we multiply by 3. What's negative 6 times 3? Negative times a positive is a negative. 6 times 3 is 18. X equals 18. Think about it, 7th graders. Negative 18 divided by 3. If you were given negative 18 divided by 3, what's your answer? Equals negative 6. Does negative 6 equal negative 6? Uh-huh. Looks like we got that one right. Let's try another. What if I had x over 5 equals negative 2? Negative 2. X over 5 equals negative 2. How would I do this, guys? How would I do this? So I'm dividing, right? I want to find out what number, if I divide it by 5, gets me negative 2. So I'm dividing. So if I multiply by 5, a positive times a negative, positive times a negative is a negative. A positive times a negative is a negative. A positive times a negative is a negative. Negative 10 equals x. Because negative 10 divided by a positive 5 is negative 2. Now, what if I had something, what if I had something like this, guys? Negative equals negative 8. Negative 4 over 5x equals negative 8. Whoa. Hold the phone. Fractions and a number and a negative sign. Okay. Deep breaths, guys. Okay. Let's take a deep breath. Okay. What you need to do for this fraction, it's multiplication. So to undo multiplication, you divide. Do you remember how you divide fractions? Do you remember how you divide fractions? How do we divide fractions? We wrote our fractions, and then what? What did we have to do with that second fraction? Second fraction. We had to get the inverse, right? We had to get the inverse of the second fraction, or the reciprocal. We had to flip it, right? You had to flip that second fraction. So, when you are dividing fractions to solve for x, you flip the fraction. Here, I'll show you. Because, watch. So I'm dividing by a negative, doesn't matter where you put your negative, negative 5 over 4. Because this cancels out. Cancel each other out and you get the x by itself. But remember, what you do to one side of the equation, you have to do to the other. So then we also have to multiply this side by a negative 5 over 4. We also have to multiply this side by a negative 5 over 4. So we get negative 40 over a negative 4, right? Because 8 times 5, because then we just can multiply straight across. You can put your 1 under the 8, multiply straight across. Negative 8 times, I had my decimal. All right, negative 8 times 5, negative 40. 1 times a negative 4, negative 4. Now you can simplify this. How do you simplify this? How many times does negative 4 go into negative 40? 10, right? X equals 10. Okay, let's walk through this one more time. So you're multiplying. This is negative 4/5 multiplied by a variable. Remember, a number right next to a variable, stuck right to a variable. is multiplication. Remember that? So to undo multiplication, we divide. To undo multiplication, we divide. And remember, division of fractions has a special property to it. We have to get the reciprocal of the second fraction. Now, this is the first fraction, so this is my second fraction, and I had to get the reciprocal of it. Remember, I had to flip it upside down. And then I was multiplying this flipped fraction, my reciprocal, to cancel out here and get x by itself. So then I also had to multiply my reciprocal, my flipped fraction, on the other side. I put a 1 over my whole number, because any whole number can be made a fraction by putting it over 1. Multiplied straight across, because that's how I multiply fractions. And then I could simplify this fraction, so I did. We're going to work with this a little bit. Fractions are going to be a little tricky for us, I think, but you are all very capable of working with fractions. I've seen your work this year. You're all very, very capable of working with fractions, and I know that you can do it. We're going to have so much fun. Last one I want to look at. This is the last one I want to look at. It says negative a equals negative 24. Negative a equals negative 24. 7th graders, we are solving for a. And some of you are going to tell me, Miss Chauncey, we've already solved for a. It's negative 24. No. Negative a is negative 24. But positive a is what? We don't know. Negative a is negative 24. To find what positive a is, see this a is being multiplied by a negative. So we need to divide by a negative 1. Divide by a negative 1 to get rid of that negative. Divide by a negative 1. Now it's negative 24 divided by negative 1. Positive 24 equals a. Okay, try that in your workbook, and we're going to go from there, guys.